Okay, so what you see there, almost everything we put on a slide has a purpose, but you'll notice the map in the background is shifted to what we normally look at, and it's a Pacific focused map. So whenever I'm out communicating about our business and about Canada, I tend to shift the map this way. Our logo there for Superyacht Canada, which is an organization we struck a number of years ago, because every other large country that has a business in super yachts has an organization to lobby the government to work on behalf of the industry itself, and we didn't have one. And that was actually one of the original gripes of a lot of the other countries, was in Canada there's nobody to go to. So we gave them someone to go to. So that's the logo there. It looks a little bit like Petro-Canada, but you can see the logo represents sort of that. We got the red water in the south and the blue water up north. Little yacht there in the maple leaf, and it also matches the colors and the branding similar to the U.S. Superyacht Association and the Australia Superyacht Association, which in the three of us combined, and the Asia Superyacht Association, are the four sort of players in the Pacific when it comes to the business side of things. On the bottom there, you see a bunch of our sponsors that we're going to give this presentation a number of places. Whenever we communicate about super yachts and the super yacht industry, we like to show something like this. This was actually put out by Greg Marshall, who I would assume most of you know, if not famous super yacht architect that works very quietly in the background on a small farm in View Royal, I think. But anyways, he likes this. He put this together a long time ago, and he talks to people about super yachting. It's really about experiences. It's not about the boat itself. Very, very rarely is it. So I'm going to touch on some industry stuff to get you caught up on what's going on. So the super yacht, this is what the global super yacht fleet looks like. So if I counted every boat in the world, which people do, super yachts over 25 meters. By the way, we'll define super yacht as anything over 24, 25 meters, right around there. If you hear me talking in Victoria, sometimes I'll say 20 meters just because our marina can only take 20 meters and up, so we didn't want to seclude the 5 meters out of it. So, but anyways, generally, when people say that, they mean that. There are subdivisions for super yachts, mega yachts, and giga yachts, but most super yacht architects will debate about where those lines are. Generally, super yachts are up to sort of the 200 foot. And then you get your 200 to your almost 300 and some odd. Those are your mega yachts, and then you get your giga yachts, which are in the 400 to 500. And there's only a couple of those on the planet, so not a big category. So there's the super yacht fleet. There's a little chart on your right. I'll give you guys can look at this if you want outside of that. When you take a look at who's driving these yachts, we started to look at were the major, where we took, say, if you take the chunk of billionaires and just put that aside, because there's a lot of information on that. It's tough to find data in the super yacht industry because it's also private. So we kind of have to work with what we get and back calculate things. But anyway, when you look at areas that are visited by super yachts, this is what it looks like. So the Mediterranean is the big one, then the US coast and the Bahamas. So the Caribbean, if you combine the two, would probably be bigger than the Caribbean. And then if you look at the brown or the golden one there, that's us, really, the US West Coast. You can see they don't even divide it into Canada West Coast and US West Coast, which I'll kind of explain. So we're underserved big time. That's all that shows. When you take a look at the migration patterns of super yachts, so this is every boat over 20, every recreational vessel over 20 meters that has AIS, and this is the charted AIS data in heat map form. And you can kind of see where in the world they're traveling, but again, we focus mainly on here. Can you see like when I point, do you see the? Yeah, okay. So this is what they call the milk run over here. So between the Caribbean and the Mediterranean, there is this milk run, this back and forth. And generally, if ships are going to a Transocean and move, that's usually where they're going. More and more, we're seeing them come through the Panama Canal and come down through this southern part. This is called the Great Southern Route, or the GSR. And It's heavily promoted by Australia for the last 15 years. And now you see this nice thick band down here, which didn't always used to be. You can kind of see a band going up the coast, but it's nowhere near as strong as this one. So we've just done zero marketing when it comes to bringing boats up our coast. So they really just don't go. We think because it's cold water, they won't come, but that's not the case, as we will see. If you ask super yachters what are their most popular destinations, that's what you get. There's Canada way on the right. New Zealand and Malta. That Malta even has one is kind of funny, a little island in the middle of the Med. When we did surveys and continue to do them of the super yacht community as a whole, and what are they looking for? What does that market want? These highlighted words come up: adventures, exploration, experiences, authentic encounters, an alternative to the milk run, something different. And it's really funny, when I first started hearing this, it really became clear that our coast offers all of these things, and this is what they're actually looking for. And they being the majority of the super yacht industry. And what are they looking for? This is it in pictures. And I've given this internationally a few times, so I'd like to actually show. You guys have seen these pictures probably. But it's the stuff we are all used to and bored of seeing, but they think is actually, like I show this and people tell me I'm lying, or this. Like, that's not really like that. You can't go out and see that. You'll never see one of these bears. It's really amazing to see that what we have and what people think is absolutely unattainable. This is what we have. So we have 27,000 kilometers of coast, and most of you know this because you're in the marine business, so I won't harp on this too much, but you can see in there what they're actually looking for. And we map itineraries up and down the coast. We probably have about 50 to 60 of these with different experiences on them. They alter and change. We have to check them now and again. We have a series of captains that inform us on what's going on. So when they come back from their season, hey, what was the year like? We also work with all of the what do you call them? The books, the guidebooks, right? All the guys that are writing. There's actually only a couple that really do a really good job, and we work with them every year to make sure we're up to date on that. This is what we're selling on the West Coast. Look at, I don't know if you can see on your screens, but you look at the yellow line, and that's the coast of the US, so the West Coast of the US, right? And then you look at it in contrast to the West Coast of Canada. And I'll go back. Not many people think about it, but the West Coast of the US is a really unfriendly place to boat. And a lot of the world's opinion on it has to do, and on the West Coast, is that they think it looks like this. Because they're in San Francisco or San Diego, and that's what they see. And it's not all that comfortable or good, right? So this is what we've got. The details on here you already know, so I won't go into them. But we like to show this when I'm showing that there's this is like a boating mecca when it comes to as far as water goes. You probably know a little bit about this, but it is even exponentially a problem with super yacht berthing up here. So the slip trends they like to hear about around the world. The super yacht slip trends are abysmal on the West Coast. As most of you all know, our facility was one of the first to be totally dedicated to it, but it's only 28 slips. And quite frankly, the largest boat we've had here is 240 feet. So that's, we're into the mega yachts, but we cannot do giga yachts. And we can only do one super yacht at a time, like one of the big 200 plus ships. And there's only a handful of berths on the West Coast that can handle that. So they did, and that's not horribly uncommon in the super yacht industry. There's a lot of anchoring that goes on, but in an unknown territory with the challenges of our waters, it's just not friendly enough for them. And of course, slips, there just aren't any. With the closing of Mosquito Creek, we even have a bigger problem right now. So the cost of slips is just rising and rising. It's going to get even worse now the Mosquito's gone, and really nothing's coming in to replace it. You saw the heat map from before. This is yachts moving around this area. So when everyone says we don't have super yachts and large yachts moving around, I'm thinking, yeah, we do. So this is the heat map for our area, and it's kind of a fun little. We actually have this on our. This is our handout as far as a piece of collateral goes, but anyway, fun little thing to look at if you haven't seen it. But most of it just confirms what you already know. The strong link between Sydney and Roche Harbor is really the international link. We've looked, and most yachts are coming up through from Seattle and straddling San Juan Island, Friday Harbor and Roche Harbor, of course. We're trying to get them to do more visits across. So this is a fun tool to look at. And then we actually watch the strengthening of these bands over the years. This data is from 2018. I haven't updated it since because it doesn't look much different. COVID really shrunk it. The year after COVID, there was a lot more superyacht activity in the area. And then last year there was less. And we don't know what's going to happen this year. It's been such a yo-yo. We don't have a clue. What is happening in the superyacht business in Canada after COVID is more and more the larger yachts are not coming into Canada. They're choosing to stay offshore and take this route and go outside the island. That's our own fault. As you now know, with the ArriveCan nightmare that's showing up, we were right in the middle of that because we took it upon ourselves to really get involved with the CBSA over the years. And we were meeting with them regularly during COVID to try to facilitate some business, and ArriveCan was part of it. And it was pretty funny now to hear what's going on, to see what we were running into with super yachts coming up, trying to check in, because there was absolutely no way for a boat to check into Canada during COVID for more than half of the time we were sort of under lock.
Craig, do you, I was just wondering, because I felt like for COVID, I know like smaller, normal size yachts, prices went up and they seem to be changing hands, and it seemed to be people were getting into yachting.
Yeah.
But on the super yacht side, that didn't seem to happen, that because of all this other stuff, international borders and whatnot. So there was less super yachting being done, or at least less in the way of yachts coming to Canada.
Yeah, I think the consensus is that what happened, and lots of things happened during COVID, but one of the things that happened was the people now people are buying, okay, so those that are buying yachts, usually if they're not upgrading, right, they're buying a new boat. And if they haven't been in boating, the boating world, as we all know, is kind of tough to get into. There's that stupid factor. Everyone doesn't, I don't know what aft and forward means and all that kind of stuff. And hey, what do we do? Well, our region's considered highly technical when it comes to your ability to just get a boat and go out there. It's daunting. It's not that it really is that difficult, although it is. It's not as bad as it's made out to be. And I think what's happened is a lot of these people have bought these boats, and there was that surge, and they're going to be using them locally wherever they are, and or in something simple before they're diving in. And I think we just made it even more complicated, and almost unfriendly, like don't come back. We had a huge problem with northern communities during COVID, literally pulling out rifles, guns, telling people don't come here, don't ever come back. Now, if you're visiting from another country, you don't really maybe know the difference between Vancouver and Campbell River, Port Hardy, Shearwater. Like, there's a big cultural change as you go up, and they don't know that. So they just stamped that on the whole region. So that ended up causing we saw a 30% decline in super yachts or large yachts visiting our waters last year on the West Coast. That's pretty big, considering it's around 2,000, I don't know last year's numbers, but it's around 2,500 boats a year. A lot more than most people know, but yeah, it did go down 30%, which, yeah, I think was just, kind of, they come here for adventure and something new and wild coast and all this kind of stuff. And if it's difficult on top of that, politically, and importing your boat, or they don't know what they're it just shut it down. I would say that's sort of a big thing, and then they stuck closer to. That would be my guess. Not a lot of Canadians bought large yachts either, though. So we kind of depend on our US partners below. The other problem in Seattle is there's no more moorage. So for new boats, a lot of times they're getting that, hey, there's nowhere to put it, so don't buy one here or don't bring it here. So they may live there, but they position it down in San Diego or San Francisco. And it's not really true that there isn't moorage. It's just there's very limited, so it's harder to find. And we don't do a very good job as an industry of getting together and saying, hey, we got 300 empty slips in Canada. We need to be up to 1,000 to take new orders. Like housing, we know down to the like 5 houses we estimate what people with boats, we don't even pay attention to it. So that's another problem. This is that same data, me looking at it. So looking at the flags that are coming here, a little deceiving if you don't know the boating industry, but most of you do, so that's good, is that this doesn't mean they're from these countries, but there's a bit of an indication. There's something else you can derive from it, but that's what the flag numbers look like. So of course, 2,400, 2,451 US visited here. So, and I don't know, yeah, that's 20 meters plus. 2,451, more than I even fathomed. Canada, of course, 902. So you can see the difference between the market of Canada and US on the West Coast. It's quite significantly different. And then they just dwindle off after that. We do work with, the Caymans, the Charlotte Island Registry, and the Cook Islands Registry. To try to promote our waters. And we've got to do more of these, but again, it's not really worth our effort too much. But if you look at how many boats are actually flagged Cook Islands, that's a better number to say, hey, maybe we should be spending some more time with that flag. Ironically, one of the more difficult ones is the US, because they're close enough to us that our rules and regs get shoved down people's throats a little bit more. Again, this is unique to us, and New Zealand has a similar sort of opportunity, I'll say, in marketing the Indigenous culture and doing it with them, of course. But it is a big pull. There is a lot of questions for that authentic original or First Nations cultural experience. We've got a lot of work to do. We're working with Indigenous Tourism BC, as well as a number of the bands and their chiefs to start providing product. We've done work with Superyachts and Helsik First, or the Haida, and a little bit with Helsik, and a ton with, of course, Coast Salish, and a little bit on the West Coast as we work our way sort of to get it all done. Some of them don't want to have anything to do with the business as well. I'd love to get new data for this, but I can't. I'm working on it. But so 2016 or 15, 16, 17, and 18, we were watching importation of yachts or yachts being delivered, dropped off, or coming here. And at that time, it went up a lot. So the trajectory, if you looked at it on a linear, I wanted to show summer and winter because we do have a season. But that's what it was, up 50% in 2018 and 17 over 15 and 16. So things were bouncing back and growing quite well here. Of course, COVID, if I had them, I know the number would be much lower. And I would say we're probably back up to these 2017 levels now. This is a little fun. I kept this because you guys can have this, but the Superyacht Association in the US did a little cost summary to say, okay, what do these yachts mean to our local economy? And this was the breakdown they came up with. We're currently in the midst of doing one ourselves. And I'll say, I'm not allowed to use names of yachts, so I'll just say the largest yacht in our marina at the moment, last year, their spend in the local economy was 1.2 million. So it's a bit on par. They're smaller than this, and that's not including fuel and moorage. So that's significant. And when we were doing studies before about when they're just coming into Victoria, the smaller boats, they were spending on average of about 30 grand. So 30 grand a summer, so let's say, or a season, they'd spend in the local economy. They are quite the contributor. This is fun. This is a fun little slide looking at all the businesses that are associated with super yachting. So we also run a concierge here at Victoria International Marina that takes care of these boats. So whether we have to, somebody comes and says, I really need a yachting agent, we direct them in that direction. If they need chickens, we show them where they are. If they want to buy a car, and we've had every single one of these. So it's amazing how we started to have to build out our association with all these, this market halo, we call it, that we have to be ready to get it stuff from, because this is what a super yachter will consider a prepared market. So in order for a captain to go into, of a super yacht, to go into a market, they want to know that that market can serve the needs of the guests, or else all they are is a disappointment to their guests, right? The captain brought us here, this place sucks. You know, I can't get my favorite wine, I want to go home. That didn't sound good, but it's generally the idea, right? This was a fun little one about BC. So you'll see the yachting, super yachting business, you'll hear them talk about, spend any length of time in it, that only 4% of the world's wealth that can afford a yacht owns a yacht. So there's 96% out there that can afford one that don't buy one. And they all complain about this. And I had to laugh. And, you know, they're complaining that, you know, that this industry is tough. There's that 4%, you got to work hard. I'm like, what about the other 96? Aren't you going after them? Who are these people? You know, why aren't they buying yachts? They just don't like to boat? What's the deal? And when I found out at asking that stupid question, no one knew the answer. Down to when I first raised my hand at a super yacht forum in Amsterdam, his first name just walked away from me, but Mr. De Vries, the senior who owns Fedship, and to the left of me was Mr. Fraser of Fraser Yachts, and I didn't know who they were. I was new to the business, and I said, "This is nuts! You guys, you can't find 96%." And I got an earful. Holy! But anyway, it didn't amount to much. So we went out looking for that. I'll show you where we found it. And then when you look back at the only 4% that have visited our region, well, I know that only 4% of that 4% have visited us. So there's this tiny little fragment of the entire population that's ever visited the West Coast. So I looked at that massive opportunity that we have here. Here's the answer to that other question. So we went out and partnered with the Super Yacht Group and started to look at the economics of the Pacific Rim and where all the money is. And at their estimation, I think Forbes was helping with this, was 2.4 trillion in private wealth in the Pacific. 44.2% of that private wealth, and it may be higher than that, and there may be more that's unreported that we couldn't figure out, especially China. You can't get the money out of there anyway. But so let's just consider it liquid wealth. 44.2% sits right in Silicon Valley and Seattle and a little bit in Vancouver. This massive chunk of market, underserved market. So it's less than 1% of this market owns a yacht. So they weren't looking over here for buyers. They weren't building product for these people. And if they were, they strongly contest that Pacific people, and especially billionaires who are more worldly in their opinion, don't have any difference in what they're looking for than a European person, which we strongly disagree. This segment of the U.S. population of billionaires is very eco-conscious. They all grew up in the comm industry, and their communities are green, and I mean community by their friends and whatnot. Everything's green, and they're big diesel clunkers that are known for, right? I mean, that's the way they see it. It's a dirty industry they don't want to be a part of. Here's where I got the 4% from. So we actually did this manually. These are all the yachts in the world, the blue, and by class. So this is under 25 meters, 25 to 30, 30 to 35, and so on. The blue is the total population of the whole fleet. So what I showed you in that first graph. The orange are what's visited here over a 2-year period, I believe. I think I did. Oh no, just 1 year, 2017. So in 1 year, that many did. And of the larger ones, you can see the 50 plus was only 9. So we've got a lot of marketing to do to bring that global, and this global fleet does not sit still. They move all over the world. So there's no reason. I mean, a lot will sit residential in like an area like the Caribbean or the Med or whatever. There are a number of those, but a lot of them travel, whether it's on their own hull or not. I'm going to skip by this. This was all the events that were going on in the Pacific before COVID. So we had this huge marketing plan internationally to bring more yachts into the Pacific, and that got turfed because of COVID. But this was our plan to market for the Olympics. America's Cup was down in New Zealand. There was one more too. The only one that's the country that's done a really good case study for economics and impact was New Zealand. We took this study and just interpolated our numbers on this, and it's astronomical. And New Zealand and Australia, it's funny. I've spent time in Australia. We went down to find out how their laws different from our laws, because we knew that they'd gone through a lot of work to make them more super yacht friendly. I was invited down to do kind of like this talk in Australia, and I ended up spending some time with their politicians who have offered to come up and help us, because their law is based on the same as ours. It's all British law from eons ago. The marine laws are super old, and they need to be updated, and especially when it comes to this advent of a business that never existed when those laws were put in place. So we've got some work to do. The good news is Australia's done a lot of that work, and New Zealand. And they consider us like another brother. They're way ahead of us when it comes to marketing their region, and for that they get way more business. Oh, this was a note. Some of you might know we held the first Pacific Super Yacht Forum, which was a completely different type of product that we held out here. Usually it's over here in Amsterdam every year. They have a big forum. That's the one listed up here. That goes along with Mets Trade, and that I really wanted to have one on the other side of the world where we could get some of these owners out to see that the Pacific Northwest is a different place than the Med, and that the users and the people that are out here have something and they can deliver for them. So we did hold one right after COVID. It was a small numbers. We had less than 100 people come out, but they were some top-notch folks. So it was good. And we're hopefully going to do another one when in the next couple of years. We're supposed to do it this year, but we're not going to. So, I mean, that's some stuff, guys. There's lots more, but I don't know. What questions do you got? What do you want to know? Has anybody left?
We're all still here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a little bit of a silly question, I guess, but given that Canada, what it is, and the amount of ice that we have up north, are super yachts ever built with any kind of ice capabilities of any kind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole class called ice class.
Okay.
And there's two types of owner. There's owners that get ice class just because it's cool, it sounds cool, kind of like getting your Jeep all outfitted when you've never been off-road in your life. There's a bit of that going on, and there's a number of boats here. There was one here. There's a handful of really big ones that have been in the marina. There was one here that was here quite a long time. If you were down in Victoria and saw it, looked like a tugboat. That's an ice class vessel. There was a very famous one called Big Fish that was designed by Greg Marshall. It's ice class. There's a whole bunch of them, and that's becoming a big trend because, of course, the Northwest Passage is open. We saw like 2 or 3 boats go through, 10 boats go through. It's going like this. It's to do so much so that we've had to. Adam Langley on the East Coast started Canada East Coast Super Yacht Association, just for the same reason we started this one. We didn't know each other, or we weren't communicating at the time, because people started asking that question: how do we go around the north? And nobody is very limited knowledge. Is 5 or 6 captains that have kind of done a recreational trip up there, and they are the gurus. We've just ponied up with them to make sure that we can help service up there. We're actually doing another one for this summer. They called us about a week ago. They're doing an expedition to the Northwest Passage, and we're going to be provisioning them all the way. So we're working with northern communities to help drop stuff. It may be on ice, it may be by helicopter, whatever the case. We'll be servicing the north. So that's up and coming. It's going to be a big deal, and it's going to be hard on those communities. So we got to figure that out too.
I was going to say there's the communities up north presumably aren't very big, most of them. So
no, and they have no idea how to service. Neither do our communities around here, for that matter. But it can be really bad up there, and we certainly don't want. It can go negative really fast. This happened in Queen Charlotte's in Haida, as we all probably know. So much so that Guayhanas Park and whatnot, we partnered, not partnered, it's the wrong word. We asked them to come down and do classes here at the marina to teach people how to cruise in these areas, so in a socially responsible way. And we were overwhelmed. People are really interested, and they were happy to know someone was going to teach them instead of them going up. We have a policy here that we won't do anything that's ethically, morally, physically, and financially unfeasible. And which is that is actually the motto of Clador. You guys know who Clador? So Clador is the secret society, if you will, of concierges around the world. If you go into a hotel and you see the concierge has these golden keys on their lapel, 2 of them.
Yeah.
Member of that. If you see one of those guys and you want something like tickets to a concert or freaking anything, ask that guy. He can call up somebody in Germany and say, I need tickets to Madonna. She's performing there. Done. So there is a group of that. And there's a few of them here. Actually, the head of the Canadian Clador was at the Oak Bay Beach Hotel. He's since moved on from not the Oak Bay, but from that position because they move it around.
It's really interesting to hear about. I didn't really appreciate how much support is needed to just make that kind of a trip work. I mean, probably there's not a lot of super yacht owners in this meeting right now. So, you know, with the experience I have and like our more commercial marine environment where it's like, well, you know, my experience is going to be limited to like going on BC ferries or whatever. It just works. Everything's there. You're on your way. You don't think about it. But this is a totally different kind of almost like economic, you know, reality distortion where like they're going somewhere, they have a big vessel that has needs, there's people that are looking to do a whole bunch of different kinds of things, and it needs to be supported, right?
Yeah.
And so like to make all that happen and really make it part of that economic impact, you know, the region has to be able to, you know and plan and kind of work around all of that. That's kind of like a big surprising aspect of how that industry would work.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's pretty interesting, I mean, like obviously, you know, the COVID pandemic brought up a lot of curveballs for everybody, but, you know, especially if you have an industry that works in, you know, in the grand scheme of things, smaller numbers, like thousands of yachts versus, you know, just any kind of tourist visiting the region, right? Sensitivity to those changes of any kind of bureaucratic uncertainty or permitting can just throw things, you know, way off, right? So I can see how that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, they're gonna come out here from the Med. That's a long trip to ship their boat out, and so when they come out here, they'll stay for usually 2 to 3 years. A larger boat, if they move it to some region, it'll stay for 2 or 3 years. If there's any uncertainty on whether or not there'll be things to do for 3 years, they won't move it there.
Interesting. So how you mentioned shipping the boat, what kinds of ways do people get their vessels around? Like what kind of methods do they use?
There's sort of 3 ways. The first way is they get on the boat and they come here, right? If they're a bigger boat, the crew's on there and they're on there as well. The other way is they stick the crew on it, and this is probably the most popular, and the crew moves the boat. So we had one vessel come in here last summer. They left. The captain got off the owners got off in Indonesia, and they arrived here. So the poor crew was on that boat for 2 months. I say poor crew. They're on a super yacht going around the Pacific. But they go all the way north, right? Because they follow the currents and the ground. No one likes to be in the middle of the ocean. They went all the way around without owners, which is really sad because we wanted the owners to see the region. But anyway, there's that. And then the third way is ships on ships. So some of you may have been at a point maybe when one of those comes in, but they're transport carriers. There's 3 main providers in this region. There's been as many as 6 or 7. They kind of ebb and flow. The shipping industry is a cruel world, especially when you're working in something as unpredictable as shipping yachts. So, for instance, the biggest shipper in yachts in the world chose to stop shipping yachts in the Pacific for the last 4 years. They're called 7-Star Yacht Transport. They also own other shipping companies. They stopped doing that and started shipping wind blades, power generation, because it was cheaper and there's way more of them and they got more money for it, which is kind of sad. So that's what they're doing now, is moving wind blades around. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of ships. That one in particular that they use for that, don't know why they use it, but it sinks. So it's like a graving dock that sinks in the water. Ship goes on, they do all the shoring, we weld all the plates, and then the ship rises out of the water. That's kind of
wow, cool. So you mentioned this East Coast Canada Association. Is that like part of Superyacht Canada now?
It is now. We're doing that right now. So
Nice.
that's Adam Lamley. He's got other jobs. He's actually running Halifax port now, and he's in charge of building some great facilities out there, which is always frustrating. They have way more money out there coming from the government to do anything, as you guys might know. I found painfully how much when I was doing the supercluster work when I was setting up Coast. It's pretty dramatic, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's Adam. He's out there. He's under Superyacht Canada now, and he's going to be a director, and anybody else. It's a very open thing. Right now, its focus is on captains. I was actually just talking to Tracy the other day. Is one of the things that we really need to do is get the captains committee going and start to empower those captains, because they are the ambassadors for this region. Captains that understand this region are the ambassadors. When a super yacht owner decides to go somewhere, they may say, depending on it, but let's just talk on average, they say, I want to go to the Caribbean, or I want to go to, I heard there's this place in the west coast of Canada. Like very rarely would it be, I want to go to Vancouver. That wouldn't happen. Or Victoria, almost never. It's I want to go to that region. What does the captain do, or the agent, depending on, or the assistant? So there's captains, agents, and personal assistants. All of them are going to Google. They aren't going to call really anybody. So they Google like the rest of us. So my investment in SEO is massive. They Google. We show up. They call us, and then they work it out. So mainly our marketing and everything goes towards those 3, not the owners themselves.
Yeah. You mentioned about how it can be kind of hard on the communities to provide provisions and that sort of thing. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more about just like the technical details of what's involved? I mean, I'm imagining that like you have a crew, a larger boat, it's got a lot of fuel needs, it's got a lot of food needs, and for like, because you're not just going for dinner, you're collecting provisions for, maybe you're out for a couple weeks or something for all the crew they have in a boat. And if you're stopping by a small village that doesn't have a lot of access, it's a lot of planning and stress to just get everything that's needed and refrigerated and all that stuff. Is that right? Can you elaborate on that as well and what that means?
Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much visualize it, right? I mean, if you've done any travel to anywhere remote, doesn't matter who you are, there's going to be things that aren't there that you're used to if you come from somewhere where there are. And that's essentially what it is. It's about managing expectations. So let's say I'll give you some examples. Last summer we had a crew go up to and stop in Shearwater. So those of you who don't know, Shearwater is right by Bella Bella. It's halfway to Prince Rupert. It is a major node in the marine world. So nodes in the marine world are generally, a large tank of gasoline over a certain distance. You end up with none left, so you got to stop. So it's just like the car world. those spots, we know them. Shearwater's one of them. So they have to go in there. Now, Shearwater used to be owned by Craig Winston, has been sold to the House of First Nation, and is now managed by those at Bella Bella. So last year, people started to show up, and there was nothing there. Like on the hotel door, there was a sign that said, "Pick your room and leave $80 in this box." The restaurant was intermittently open. To the point where when we had a guest going up there, we knew they were going up. We called ahead and we worked with them to have this amazing experience built. And if they went and they had an amazing time, but generally right now, that's the difference. If you don't, and we set their expectations up, you're not going to be staying at the hotel. You have to stay on your boat, which most of them are fine with. We've got food prepared. It's going to be this special dinner down on the beach. It's not in the restaurant. Why? Because there's no chef. So there's lots of that. The provisioning ones, if they don't know, they might show up at a community and ask for things and never find it, or be told to leave. And they're just frustrated. Their tone will be off. People aren't into it. But the main provisioning spots are pretty good. I mean, Campbell River's one of them. We're one of them. Shearwater used to be, and then Prince Rupert is your next one. And other than that, you're generally not stopping for any expectations. So the other one for delivering is recreational experiences. So if you want to go see, how would you go see a white spirit bear in the Great Barrier Rainforest? Right? It's kind of the Wild West up there. I mean, some people will call ahead. They see an ad online that this First Nation's doing it. They call them. They say yes. They get up there. No one shows up. Right? They just spent conservatively $3 million to go up and see a white spirit bear, and no one shows up. That doesn't end well. And as far as how they feel about it, I mean, they got to suck it up like everybody, and I guess they go on and try to find one themselves. And so that kind of thing can be a problem. Medical and emergency stuff is another big one. We're trying to tackle this with the Coast Guard right now, but some captains will be checking to make sure that if something happened to one of their guests, that they can make sure that they can evac them to a hospital very quickly. So that's another one. And then the other one would be crew, making sure the crew are available. There's a lot of crew that live in Victoria and work all around the world. There's actually a lot of superyacht crew that live in Victoria. Not on boats here, but which is a good thing we found out. We didn't have to work too hard on that, but it's going to be a problem. And that's another sort of provisioning one, is one crew member goes down and they need 10 crew, not 9, in order to legally operate that vessel. They got to fly somebody else in. And where that going to come from? How are they going to get there? Where are they going to go? You could spend half your vacation figuring that out. So.
Really interesting. So there are like Transport Canada regs on the number of crew.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So a certain class, it depends on the class of your vessel and the size. So that's why there's these boundaries, these arbitrary boundaries you'll find in, like 20 meters is one of them in our marina. Has nothing really to do with the boundary, but they picked it because it existed. And that's that all boats 20 or 65 feet or 20 meters and over have to have a captain and a skipper. So that's to be 2 people on board while you're docking and all that kind of stuff. So they're considered more safe or more whatever. And there's a whole bunch of those. And to a point where you're over 500 tons, and then you have to have a West Coast captain on board. You're not even allowed to have a foreign captain. They have to be they have to have their ticket for here, and that's where the whole business of pilots is. And there's 2 pilot groupings. There's commercial pilots, which you see the yellow pilot boats in Victoria all the time rushing out. So whenever a tanker comes in, pilot gets on that boat, flies out to the tanker, gets on board, drives it into Vancouver. That happens all the time here. Little did we really know what's happening, actually. Most Victorians probably have no idea. And then superyachts, same thing. But one of those captains is unlikely to be the one on board. There's sort of another group of recreational pilots built on old commercial pilots. And that's around $1,000 to $2,000 a day for one of those pilots.
Right. I think I remember seeing pilot boats out at Ogden Point, for example.
Yeah, they're out there, yellow and blue, I think.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, they're cowboys. They're funny to watch. They're insane because they got to get off a moving boat onto like a rope ladder on a tanker and climb up it. It's insane.
Yeah, it's interesting if you search on YouTube for videos of those kinds of things happening, and hopefully they're don't get injured very often.
You can always get some binoculars and go to Ogden Point. It happens almost every day. It's pretty fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions, maybe we'll wrap it up there. It was a super interesting talk, Craig. I think we could probably keep asking questions into the night. But yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, I guess we'll see everyone again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Craig. It's great to get just a peek of like all the different issues behind having a smoothly working, industry and what's necessary to get something working, and just a totally different kind of industry to get some perspective on. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if any of you or anybody wants more information or come talk to me about working with us or working with these boats or whatever, come talk to me. Wide open.
Awesome.
Nice.
Right.